Institute of Physics. And Mikko Sipilä will continue, and she's from Finland.
Thank you. Hello. In a spirit of cooperation and example of this cooperation, we will have this talk joined with my good colleague Mikko Sipilä from University of Helsinki. But I'll start off and lay the head for him to tell more complicated stuff. How do I start? Do I have to press something? There's only 3 buttons. I'm headless, handless, hopeless. All right. Yes. So the talk is Aerosol Without Borders. Borders is doesn't mean necessarily a border, a political border, or it can be a political border. It's really up to you how to interpret. Talk is about aerosols and the climate change. I bring up the old slide from 2016 from IPCC report because I find this more easy to explain than the new one that has been put up last year. And in this slide, the red area is all anthropogenic factors that do affect climate by warming it. So anthropogenic, so humans' influence. And in the red, blue side, we have aerosols, or we have factors that do cool the climate, or at least that by some modeling. And we see majority, or most of the cooling part is associated with aerosols. So aerosols are only anthropogenic influence that we do to the climate that actually fights back the cooling. Obviously, it is all in balance. And the other big message here is the error bar, so the uncertainty associated with aerosols. So actually, these error bars can be even bigger. So some aerosols do warm climate. Not everybody, all aerosols are cooling climate. But the majority of these error bars is actually translated into the total effect of anthropogenic activities on a climate. So this uncertainty is mostly associated phenomenon that is associated with aerosols. Here is a list of sources of aerosols, and we will concentrate on this very, very last and the most important part, the atmospheric new particle formation, the mechanism of the atmosphere to make aerosols by itself, and how humans do play a role in making that. To oversimplify the whole process, we have a soil, we have a forest, we have a sea and water bodies, we have factories and cars and humans and everything that we live on the ground, and we do put molecules to atmosphere. And then the complicated photochemistry, mostly photochemistry starts, and we start to convert those molecules into something that doesn't want to be gas anymore. So there is mysterious process in atmosphere where the gas doesn't want to be gas anymore. It wants to be condensate out, to be atmospheric cluster, to be atmospheric particle, to grow so big that it can be a cloud droplet. This is the take-home message. 80% of cloud droplets that we see out there are formed on particles that were gases when they were emitted. So to say, secondary particles that are formed in atmosphere through atmospheric processes. And this is what we study. How common it is, this is example of new particle formation events. Normally, the event is one event per day. So there is one day when particles are formed, next day they are not formed. So there is this particle formation events, and there is tens of thousands of particles formed, and it happens everywhere. It happens sometimes so that all our stations in Estonia, Finland, up north there, they all see the same new particle formation event at the same time. So you could see all 3 stations or 4 stations, and we see it everywhere. Sometimes it happens only on one station. So it's a little bit like a cloud cover if you look from the satellite. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, but it can be huge. In a total region, there is new particles formed. And if you calculate those days when particles are formed compared to the days when particles are not formed, we get this ratio here. So 0.8 would mean 80% of days particles were formed in a month of January. So actually in January, we see there is very few particles formed. The colors are here, different stations, one in Estonia and two in Finland. And there is two messages here. One is that there is a massive peak during the springtime. And there is almost no particle formation days during the wintertime. So it is clearly related to the yearly cycle and clearly related to biology. That's where nature starts to wake up from the winter sleep and starts to emit lots of biological VOCs, volatile organic compounds, to the atmosphere, which starts to oxidize. And oxidation products are low volatile, and they want to condensate and make particles in order to be seeds for the clouds. The cloud formation is a meteorology, but in order for the cloud to form, we need those seeds, the particles, to form on. So springtime, massive new particle formation events across the region. There is a little bit of a difference between the boreal forest, hemiboreal forest, and then very Nordic ecosystems in intensities, but the yearly pattern is very similar. Hemiboreal forest, where we have lots of broadleaf trees on top of, or in addition to pine trees, does not have so strong new particle formation potential as the pine trees, the deciduous trees have. So that might explain the difference we see here between Estonia and in central Finland location, Hyutiala. Now, when looking back, the first measurements in Tahkuse station close to Pärnu started end of 80s. And then we divided here the days into aerosol passive days and aerosol active days. Active day means there is new particles formed, and passive means there is nothing related to new particles. And we do see here that this significant trend in having more aerosol non-active days. So there is less and less aerosols produced in our region by the atmosphere itself. It's roughly 2 days per year there is a less and less aerosol production. Clear reason for that, I don't know. Hypothesis is we cleaning out sulfur dioxide from atmosphere, which is one of the key mechanisms of making aerosols. We're cleaning out NOx pollution. That would be, maybe in this particular station there is less forest around the station, although, like I said, the phenomenon is regional. So this one forest around the station is not explaining what we see at the station. So it's a bigger, broader area. So the aerosol production potential of the atmosphere has changed over the time. And this is 35 years, which is a climatically relevant time scale already. So we can start to think about climate with this time scale. So in order to study that further, we have established and we have a network of stations that we have already existing data, and we're collecting new data. All of these stations have instrumentation that do measure aerosol formation, aerosol quality, aerosol size, and number concentration. And in these brackets, I can mention all of these stations have an instrument that is developed and built in Tartu, some of the instruments. So there is a station north of Greenland, in Svalbard, New-Ålesund, and Värriö, Hyutiala, and 2 stations in Estonia, Järvselja, Prime Forest, and the Tahkuse station here. So this research is ongoing, and there is a very much of interesting and complicated chemistry involved. Don't concentrate on chemical equations here, but the message here is that aerosols, in order to form, we need oxidation. And we need oxidation, we need ozone. And the Arctic is very special about having sometimes even very long periods of very active ozone depletion events. And this is one example from the paper last year, where this mechanism of how ozone has been depleted from atmosphere that is required for new particle formation. So this halogen chemistry related to snowpack emission of brominated chlorine gas has explaining these ozone depletion events in Arctic, which has been observed during the ship experiment in a Mosaic and in Station Nord and in Ny-Ålesund station. But not only in Arctic you can do Arctic-related work. There is experiment in CERN called Cloud Experiment that concentrates on looking at different chemical mechanisms of new particle formation. And you see down here there are different kind of sources that is emitting something to atmosphere. And this something emitted to atmosphere has related to chemical mechanisms which are red here that the cloud chamber tries to study. Cloud chamber is CERN cloud chamber is very unique chamber in a sense that it's made with, let's say, CERN quality, which means ultra pure, ultra clean, ultra. Everything is very expensive and very, very clean. So you can really pin down the individual molecule by molecule mechanisms that we can do there in CERN. And at the moment, there are special Arctic-related questions being raised, and the whole last year, this year, and 2 more years are concentrating on cold regions of atmosphere and which mechanisms are active in this Arctic or otherwise cold region. Cold region is also up there in the free troposphere, minus 50, minus 30 degrees, where special chemistry happens. Quickly mentioning that we are part also in a great feedback European project where we concentrate on looking at greenhouse gas emissions from many Arctic stations. But with that, I will conclude and give word to Mikko Sipilä, tell about new particle formation mechanisms more in detail.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Heikki. And I'm Mikko Sipilä. I work at the University of Helsinki, its Institute for Atmospheric and Earth System Research. We have a research station in Finnish Lapland. It's called Värriö Research Station, and that's where I'm physically located, and I run the station. But I will tell something about the Arctic and Antarctic research, what we perform at the Institute, and a significant fraction of that is either made in collaboration, especially with Heikki. We have been on joint expeditions with him, and also we utilize internationally developed instruments, and as Heikki mentioned, one of the key instruments what we use and need in our studies is developed here in Estonia, in Tartu. And also we use software which is developed mainly by Heikki to analyze our results. So this Finnish-Estonian connection is super important for us as the Institute in order to be able to perform these studies. So we do nothing alone. We always do this work in collaboration with those who know their business, and here we certainly have people who know. Okay, I start with this photo. This is a satellite image from the Arctic Ocean's wall part is there on the top, and the green in the ocean is chlorophyll. There is a phytoplankton bloom ongoing in the ocean. And what is known has been known for a long time that this phytoplankton is producing a compound called dimethylsulfonopropionate in the ocean, which is then converted in microbiological processes to dimethyl sulfate that can be evaporated to the atmosphere. And this sulfur compound oxidizes in the atmosphere to form especially methane sulfonic acid and sulfuric acid. And these two compounds have been known that they probably can make new aerosol particles, the particles Heikki just explained, which are then important for the cloud cover because those particles can modify the cloud properties, and therefore for the climate globally, but especially here in the Arctic. Well, this figure is now pretty much what was known roughly a decade ago in the Arctic aerosol formation processes. So we have the phytoplankton here, the green dots, and it was known that this dimethyl sulfate comes from the ocean because of this plankton, and it forms sulfuric acid and methane sulfonic acid. Not much more was known. Then there were lots of question marks. What happens to these compounds? How they form these small little particles or clusters? How those clusters grow to particles which are large enough that they can modify clouds and eventually climate? And of course, we have much more stuff in the ocean than just this phytoplankton. We have, open ocean, but we have also sea ice. There is plankton living also within or underneath the sea ice. Is there something coming from the ice? We didn't know. There we have fish in the ocean. Birds are eating fish. Birds are pooping. There is guano, which may emit stuff like ammonia to the air. We have some vegetation in tundra-covered areas. We have snow. In the Antarctica, we have penguins and so on. And there are also stuff coming directly from the ocean, like sea salt particles, crystals, biological things. Dust and pollen may be flying around if there is vegetation nearby and so on. But mostly just question marks. So I have dedicated most of my career in figuring out what happens here. And this is now some of our field activities on this map. The color is also now showing the temperature, how much temperatures have changed in this area. Black ones are the annual mean temperatures, and the blue ones are November, December, January temperatures, so the midwinter temperatures. And you can see that they have increased quite significantly from pre-industrial times. But we have had campaigns in Greenland, in Station Nord, Ny-Ålesund, Svalbard. We have had continuous measurements, a tiny little station in conjunction with Italian station in Ny-Ålesund. We are measuring there right now. And the Mosaic expedition was an expedition with the Polarstern German icebreaker research vessel, which was parked to the sea ice during COVID years. For 1 full year. This my station is somewhere here, Värriö, where we have had continuous measurements more than 3 decades now. And similar stuff then in Antarctica. We are active at Marambio, which is Argentinian station in Antarctic Peninsula. Then we have continuous measurements at Concordia, and South Pole measurements are just about to start. They are operated by Americans and then Italians, respectively. We are not physically there, very much at least. Then we have our Finnish station, Apoa station, about which I think Britt Diesler is somewhere here, will say something. Tomorrow I have been there with Britt a decade ago. And then Neumayer station, German station. These are the places where we have been collecting our data. And here are just some fancy photos from those expeditions. And after doing that research, what we have learned, we have been able to kind of complete this figure. So we conceptually understand and know how these particles form. So once again, the phytoplankton here emits dimethyl sulfide forming methane sulfonic acid and sulfuric acid. And then this sulfuric acid, I was too fast. But then we have this fish here, birds and penguins are eating fish, and their guano is producing ammonia. Okay, we have found that one is important as well. Tundra vegetation surprisingly produces quite a lot of organic compounds. And these organic compounds are oxidized to so-called heavily oxidized organic molecules. Then sea ice especially, and possibly also snowpack, they are emitting iodine compounds. Iodine produced in a way or the other by phytoplankton, which is living underneath or within the sea ice. There are question marks in the exact mechanisms how it goes to the atmosphere, but anyway it comes from the sea ice and it oxidized to things called iodic acid and iodose acid, which we discovered from the atmosphere 2016 or something with Heikki for the first time ever. And then we have also solved how these compounds now make new particles. And in the Arctic and Antarctic region, the most important mechanism I would say is this one where sulfuric acid goes together with ammonia and the influence of galactic cosmic radiation, which is ionizing the air. So they make tiny little clusters. Also, this iodic acid can make small little particles with iodose acid or with sulfuric acid. So this is a mechanism which is important over sea ice-covered regions like northern Greenland and whatever ice-covered Arctic regions. So these are like the two most important mechanisms. Then we have also the heavily oxidized organics, which may be quite important in tundra-covered regions like Svalbard coasts, whatever Greenland coasts, and so on, and so on. And these mechanisms can also like mix. So iodic acid can go together with sulfuric acid and ammonia and vice versa. And the heavily oxidized organics go together with sulfuric acid and so on. And then depending on the availability of these compounds, then pretty much all of these compounds can condense on these initial clusters and grow particles to the sizes where it can act as cloud condensation nuclei, affect cloud properties and climate. So after something like 15 years of work, we kind of know how these things happen. There are still some further research topics what we want to target next. It's the anthropogenic effects, anthropogenic air pollution from ships, from industry and so on, emitting especially sulfur dioxide and primary particles like soot. And how this influences the system in the Arctic and also in Antarctica is something we want to look in detail in the future as well. This is the end of our talk. Thank you very much, and we are very happy to answer your questions if you have some. The flying animal is my kids, like this kind of a toy owl, which I was transporting on all my expeditions everywhere and taking photos with penguins and whatever animals and other places. Yeah.
Excuse me, just one question. Although you mentioned that the influence of anthropogenic sources, you are still looking into that, but what does your gut tell you? Is the CO2, I mean sulfuric dioxide, also important factor in cloud-forming particles?
Yeah, sulfur dioxide is out of the anthropogenic gases. It's like the key gas which is causing this anthropogenic cooling climate effect Heikki was talking about. And sulfur dioxide, for example, at our Värriö research station in Finnish Lapland, we are located just like a few kilometers from Russian border and quite close, 100-150 kilometers away from Monchegorsk region, where there is lots of smelters and heavy industry which is emitting sulfur dioxide. And there we can see very clearly this anthropogenic sulfur dioxide contributing to particle formation. How much that is doing, contributing in the Arctic, I don't yet have a very good answer. But generally, in the whole world, the sulfur dioxide emissions are like, they have been like bending and then will be slowly going down. So the anthropogenic effects probably are to decrease in the future rather than increase. But we need to understand how they are acting now so that we can also predict or give some good guesses how the decreasing sulfur dioxide concentration will accelerate probably climate change in the future. So that's why we want to look that in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
We shall have the coffee break now, please.